Hey everybody, I just got this Soundmaster disco beat used, of course, and the seller said there was a problem with the sound output, that it sounded like there was some kind of flanger on the output, and I thought it might be worth a shot to try to fix it. As you can see, I've already opened it, and here's what the board looks like, a bit closer shot, and the trace side. So when I wanted to try it, I grabbed my standard 9-volt adapter, which happens to be a 2-man 9-volt 500 milliamps with center negative, as is standard on pedals. So I plug this in. It's like with any other battery operated pedal that if you unplug it, it will open the circuit to the power supply, so it won't be able to turn on unless you plug something in. So what does it sound like? Let me connect a recorder to the mixer output so you can get the lined audio. Now it's lined. Can you hear that ringing noise in the background? Let me turn this up a bit. I thought that was the hi-hat because if you listen to it, what it sounds like when you start it, it's easy to think that this is the hi-hat. Listen. The first thing I noticed was that it sounds very dull, kind of muffled sound, and it doesn't have any noise in the hi-hat. I mean, it doesn't have any noise in the snare drum, but this ringing sound gets modified by what sounds like an envelope. So I was thinking that maybe the hi-hat section is weird and it just sounds muffled overall. But then a friend of mine that has a similar unit like this one, he told me that his sounds really weird as well when he uses a bad power supply. So I'm gonna try with a bench power supply instead, and we'll see with the same volume settings if there's any difference. So now I'm using my bench power supply. I attach negative lead and positive lead. And let's turn the power on. Full volume. Well, I don't hear any kind of ringing. I'm going to turn the volume up like I did before. Doing that now. Down again. Maybe it's not super clean, but it's nowhere near as noisy and ringing as it was before. In fact, I don't hear anything at all now. I might have to listen to it in the recording afterwards, but through the speakers now, I don't hear anything. So that ringing noise is from bad power supply and or bad power supply filtering. Another thing to note with the bench power supply is that when I start it, listen carefully. There is no hi-hat whatsoever. The only thing you hear is the thuds from the kick and the snare. Now back to this board. After I've been trying to revert some modifications I noticed had been done. There had been some modifications here. This is a trimmer. These are the end pins and this is the wiper. This connection here was cut. There was no connection from these two traces and that pin. Instead, from this pin there was a wire which led to ground. So this pin was grounded and not connected to these two. This end of the trimmer was connected to this pin here, which is a pin of a transistor. And I believe the solder pad has lifted and there was no connection here. I can't quite recall if that's exactly what happened, but I tried to restore whatever changes I could see and patch up with pieces of old component pins, component legs, like I did here. There was a big loop of a wire going here that just connected these two because this trace was damaged and the pad had lifted and the trace was had open circuit. So I just put a piece of component wire, component leg here instead, making sure I'm not shorting the wire to any of these two pads. So after restoring this and doing a bit of reverse engineering, or at least try to, I think that the trimmer I was showing you earlier, this one here, it's this trimmer, and I believe if I've only reverse engineered this small part right here, where I marked the capacitors and the transistors and everything best as I could, and this is it. It's drawn very illogically because I never know what will appear where, and you know, when you reverse engineer stuff, everything ends up in weird places and you don't know which pins are which when you see a transistor and all that. But this trimmer here is this trimmer. Say you disconnect this and ground it. What is this circuit then? It's basically nothing. I believe that this is the noise generator circuit. This is a transistor with 3 pins, of which one is just connected to a pad that doesn't lead anywhere. It has no traces going from it. I can't see anything connected to it. And that's typical noise generation configuration. Like you take a transistor with, say, an open collector and you tap the signal from it into an amplifier and you get your noise that way. And I suspect that tracing further back I could see a lot of diodes down here coming in parallel. I think these are pulses triggering noise coming from this transistor, and this was grounded, no noise was being triggered. Why was that done? I have no idea. Obviously the person who did this knew what he was doing when he was grounding this. It's not just a random modification. I can't imagine that. I'm going to show you what it sounds like after I've restored this connection here, and then we'll have to see what the problem can be, because it's still not working. But let's listen to it. Alright, so it's connected and I'm going to start it. The start button is just pulling down the signal to ground, so that's what I'm doing with this wire. Whoops, a bit of bounce. So you can hear this hi-hat, it's being triggered because you hear those little clicks. So I really think that what's happening now is the trigger pulses are actually getting to the transistor that will allow the noise to get through to the output, but there is no actual noise being generated, so everything we're hearing is just clicks from the envelope action. So I'm gonna have to try to probe around a bit and see if there is any noise and if these really are trigger signals that I'm hearing. But I think this is the right direction. Now I noticed something interesting as I was probing. When I'm putting the scope probe on the wiper of the trimmer I was talking about before, listen. So now it's running, and now I'm going to probe. Do you hear that? Do you hear that? This is the scope probe at the 1x setting. Okay? And this is the scope probe with the 10x setting. What's the difference? Different capacitance. I suspect something is allowing the signal going to ground through the scope probe, through the capacitance in the scope probe, and that might suggest we have a bad capacitor in here somewhere. So we're allowing the signal through the scope probe where it should normally go through some of the caps in the circuit. Now these are old greenies, and I'm not sure if they get old with age and go bad, but I mean, of course they go old. I'm not sure if they go bad with old age, but I'm definitely suspecting there's a problem with them. In particular, there is one cap, C10, and the area I'm talking about is here. This is C10. I was probing here and I could see pulses, and here it was just all flat. And when I'm probing here, you can hear the noise in the hi-hat. So there is something funny going on here with, I suspect, one or two caps, one or both of these caps. I'll check a little bit more. So here's something fishy. This trimmer again that I was talking about earlier. This trimmer here, if I'm not mistaken, it says 103, which as far as I know means 10K. So this should be a 10 kilo ohm trimmer, right? So expected resistance between this and this pin should be no more than 10K, maybe less depending on the rest of the circuit, but certainly not more. So check this out. One end of the trimmer and the other end. 4.3 megs? That can't be right. The other way, just for fun. What? Nothing? Something's not right here. I don't think this trimmer is making connection. I'm measuring between one pin and the wiper, and it's around 290K. No, this is the other pin on the wiper, 5K, so this seems to be working fine. There's a problem with the other end. Maybe there's a break in the carbon somewhere. I'm going to try replacing this trimmer and see if it helps. No, that didn't help. In fact, it made it worse. Because now when I probe the wiper, I get no change in the sound at all. Well, at least I hopefully fixed something by replacing this bad trimmer, but maybe it just indicates a problem further down the line. Well, there isn't much more. The transistor is the next thing. So replacing this one didn't help at all, and now when I'm probing the wiper, I'm not getting any noise either, so it made it worse. Maybe I should just start replacing components. I hate doing that. It feels so... But certainly this should be working somehow, with the pulses coming in here and noise being generated when I probed this one before. I'm gonna leave the new trimmer in, because I mean there's no way it was supposed to work with the old one in that had like 4 megs between the ends here. But the question now is, what is the problem if not here? Alright, so I did some more checking, and I thought there was another faulty component, but of course it turned out to be another bad solder joint. One of the pins from the mod earlier, with one of the pads that had lifted on one of the transistors, that joint had gone open and there was no connection between the pad and the actual trace on the PCB. So I redid that, and listen to this. Do you hear it? Well, where's the hi-hat? Now look what happens when I turn the trimmer that I replaced. Beautiful, isn't it? So it seems that the only problem with this was a bad trimmer and some really shitty soldering jobs on the trace side here, causing open circuits here and there. So it took a few hours to get to this point, because I had to do some reverse engineering to figure out how the circuit worked, but that helped me isolate probable areas that were a problem. And even if I'm not sure I analyzed the circuit correctly, I probably wasn't too far off. So I'm quite happy with this. I call this a success.